He thought he was walking into a hotel. He did not realize he was walking into a mirror. The lobby of the Ardent Grand smelled of cedar and money. Polished travertine floors reflected the chandelier overhead like a still lake catching fire. The front desk staff stood in their pressed ivory uniforms, spines straight, smiles calibrated to the exact degree of warmth that management approved. Everything was perfect. Everything was a performance. And standing just outside the revolving door, wearing a faded canvas jacket and a pair of scuffed work boots, was Fletcher Dowd, CEO and majority owner of Ardent Hospitality Group, the parent company of every Ardent Grand Hotel on the Eastern Seaboard. Nobody inside knew that, of course. That was the point. Fletcher had not planned this. 3 weeks ago he had received an anonymous letter, handwritten, which was unusual enough to stop him cold. It read, "You have built something beautiful. But I wonder if you have ever truly seen it. No signature, no return address. Just those 2 sentences and a folded newspaper clipping about a hotel guest in the Ardent Grand's Charleston branch, who had been quietly turned away from the concierge desk because, in the words of one staff member caught on a personal phone camera, he didn't look like he belonged." The clip had 13,000 views before the account was deleted. Fletcher's PR team had handled it, but the letter sat on his desk for 3 weeks, and he could not explain why he could not throw it away. So here he was. 41 years old, architect of a hospitality empire worth 9 figures, standing in the rain outside his own flagship property in a jacket he had borrowed from his building's maintenance supervisor. He pushed through the revolving door. The warmth of the lobby swallowed him whole. For a moment, he just stood there, letting his eyes adjust. 2 bellhops near the luggage carousel spoke in low voices and did not look up. A woman at the concierge desk, gold nameplate, sharp posture, glanced toward Fletcher, held her gaze on his jacket for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, and then turned back to the couple she was assisting. Fletcher drifted toward the front desk. There were 3 agents on duty. The one on the far left, a man with a sculpted jaw and an expression that suggested he found most people vaguely inconvenient, watched Fletcher approach with the particular stillness of someone deciding whether to engage. His name tag read Dirk. "Checking in?" Derek asked. The question had no warmth in it. It was a diagnostic tool. "Actually, I'm not sure yet," Fletcher said. "I wanted to ask about room availability. I've had a rough couple of days. Long drive." Derek's eyes dropped to Fletcher's boots, came back up. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, I was hoping to walk in." A pause that lasted 1 beat too long. "Our standard rooms start at $480 a night," Derek said. His tone had shifted almost imperceptibly, still professional technically, but with a kind of efficiency that suggested the conversation could end at any moment and he wouldn't mind. "I understand," Fletcher said. "Could I just—" "Derek." A voice from the end of the desk, quiet and even. "I've got this one." Fletcher turned. The woman walking toward him had the unhurried pace of someone who was never in a hurry because she never wasted a step. Her name tag read Camille Ose. She was in her early 30s, maybe with a calm face and eyes that seemed to take stock of a situation without broadcasting any conclusions. "Good evening, sir," Camille said, her voice the same temperature as the lobby, warm without being theatrical. "I'm so sorry you've had a long drive. Can I get you some water while we talk through your options?" Fletcher blinked. "That would be great, actually." She poured a glass from the small carafe at her station without making a production of it. She did not ask again about the reservation. She did not recite the room rates with the inflection of a warning. She simply pulled up the screen, asked him how many nights he was thinking, and told him about 2 available room types with the same matter-of-fact courtesy she would have given a man in a 3-piece suit. Fletcher watched her work. He noticed the way she angled the monitor slightly toward him so he could follow along. He noticed that she didn't glance once at his jacket. From the corner of his eye, he also noticed Derek lean toward the concierge, the same woman who had looked at Fletcher at the door and murmur something. The concierge pressed her lips together and said nothing. But her silence was an agreement. Fletcher paid for 1 night in cash, which he'd brought specifically for this purpose. He took the key card Camille handed him with both hands, the way his grandfather had taught him to accept things given with care. "The elevator is just past the fountain," Camille said. "If you need anything at all tonight, please call the desk directly. Ask for me." He nodded. He did not trust himself to say much more. His room was on the 14th floor. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time without taking off his jacket. He was used to seeing this hotel through spreadsheets. Occupancy rates, RevPAR, guest satisfaction scores averaged into a single number that told him, presumably, how people felt about staying here. He had built the whole scoring system himself, actually, back when the company was smaller, and he still understood what the numbers were measuring. Sitting here now, in a room that smelled faintly of industrial lavender, he understood something the spreadsheets had never told him. The scores couldn't capture a 2-second look at a man's boots. They couldn't quantify the weight of a pause that said you don't belong here without a single word. He pulled out his phone. He typed a text to his assistant Renata. No. He stopped himself. Not Renata. Not tonight. Tonight, he was still Fletcher in the borrowed jacket, and there was more to see. He went down to the hotel bar. The bar was called the Meridian, all dark walnut and amber light, the kind of place that made people feel important for being in it. Fletcher took a stool at the far end and ordered a club soda. The bartender, a young man named OZ according to his tag, set it down without ceremony and moved on. 20 minutes later, the woman from the front desk walked in. Camille Ossie was off the clock now, or almost. She was still in her uniform but had loosened the top button of her collar. She sat down 2 stools away, ordered a ginger ale, and only then seemed to register that Fletcher was there. "Oh," she said. She almost smiled. "Room 14. Guilty," Fletcher said. She nodded, not intrusively curious, just easy. They sat in the shared quiet of the bar for a moment, and then, because the night had a particular kind of honesty to it, Fletcher said, "Does it happen a lot? What happened at the desk tonight?" Camille looked at her glass, a small careful pause. "You noticed. I noticed." She didn't pretend she didn't know what he meant. "That too," he noted. "It happens," she said simply. "People make assumptions about what kind of guest you are before you've had a chance to be any kind of guest at all." She turned the glass slowly on the bar. "I don't think most of them realize they're doing it. But the guest always does." Fletcher looked at her. There was something in the way she said it that told him she wasn't just describing other people's experiences. "Has it happened to you?" he asked. "A beat. I grew up in a neighborhood that made people nervous when I told them the name of it. I put in 4 years working hotel housekeeping before I was ever allowed behind a front desk." She said it without self-pity, just as one states a geography. "I know what it feels like to walk through a door and have someone clock you as a problem before you've opened your mouth." Fletcher was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the city moved in its usual indifferent rush. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "Because when I help someone feel like they belong here, even for one night, especially when they come through that door, looking like they've had the kind of week that breaks people, that matters to me." She shrugged, a small thing. "I'm not changing the world, but I'm changing that moment." She finished her ginger ale, set it down neatly, and stood. "Have a good night," she said. "I hope the room is comfortable." And then she left, just like that. No fishing for a compliment, no waiting to see if the conversation could become something more. She had said what was true and she was done. Fletcher sat with his club soda going flat and felt something shift in his chest that he couldn't immediately name. He did not sleep much. He lay in the dark of room 1412 and stared at the ceiling and thought about his father, which was not something he usually permitted himself to do. His father had built the first Ardent Inn, a 12-room property in rural Virginia, with a hand-painted sign and a breakfast buffet that ran on a budget of almost nothing and a philosophy of almost everything. "Every person who walks through that door is a guest," his father used to say. "Not a transaction, not a risk assessment, a guest." His father had died when Fletcher was 32. The company had tripled in size in the 9 years since. Fletcher had told himself, repeatedly, that growth was the tribute, that expansion was the legacy. He looked at the ceiling and wondered, for the first time, whether that was true. At 2 in the morning, he pulled out his phone and opened the internal employee directory. He looked up Camille Ossie. She had started as a housekeeper here 11 years ago. Room attendant, then lead attendant, then floor supervisor, then a lateral move into front desk operations 6 years in. Her performance reviews were immaculate. Not the hollow kind padded with adjectives, but the specific kind, with notes like resolved a guest complaint involving a double booking during peak season, with no manager present, and created an informal peer training guide for new front desk hires that has since been adopted by 3 other properties. Her current salary was $54,000 a year. Fletcher closed the directory. He lay there a long time after that, not looking at the ceiling anymore, looking at nothing, feeling the particular discomfort of a man who has built something he is proud of and has just discovered a crack he put there himself. The morning came gray and quiet. Fletcher checked out early. Camille was not at the desk. Her shift didn't start until noon. And he was glad. He wasn't ready yet. He needed to think, and thinking was something he did best when he was moving. He drove back to his office, still in the borrowed jacket, and sat at his desk for 20 minutes before anyone arrived. Then he called in his director of operations, a methodical man named Alston Drieer, who had been with the company for 14 years, and asked him to pull every guest complaint tagged with variations of the words unwelcome, ignored, or dismissed, filed at the flagship property over the past 18 months. Alston did not ask why. He came back 40 minutes later with a printed list. There were 63. Fletcher read through them one by one. Most described the same thing in different words. A pause. A look. A moment where someone decided, without a word spoken, that a guest was not worth their full effort. 2 mentioned Derek by name. Several mentioned the concierge desk. A few were vaguer, something about the way they looked at me. But those were the ones Fletcher found himself reading twice. He spent the afternoon reviewing security footage. It was something he had the access to do but had never once exercised, because he had trusted the scores. He watched Derek with a middle-aged woman in a worn coat, who asked about their accessibility options. He watched the concierge desk redirect a man to a hotel 3 blocks away without explaining why. He watched Camille Ossi greet a family of 4 who arrived looking exhausted and clearly uncertain whether they were in the right place, and he watched her spend 12 minutes making sure they felt like they were. She never looked at the clock. She never looked past them at the line behind them. She just looked at them. Fletcher leaned back in his chair. The cold, clean rage in his chest was not the explosive kind. It was the kind that calcified, the kind that became policy. He typed a single email to Alston Greer with 3 attached files, the guest complaints, the footage, and a proposed staffing action, and a subject line that read, "We need to talk tomorrow morning." Then he opened his messages and stared at his phone for a long time. Finally he typed, "This is Fletcher. From the bar last night. I know this is unusual. I got your contact from the company directory, which I realize sounds strange. I wanted to thank you. The conversation we had mattered more than you know. I hope your day is going well." He put the phone down, picked it up again. Put it down. It buzzed. "This is a little unusual," Camille had written. "But okay, the shift just started. Day is going fine so far. I hope your drive was better today." Fletcher read it twice. There was no performance in it. Just the same even, unadorned honesty she'd offered across a bar top the night before. He wrote back, "Much better, thank you." Over the following days they texted in the way that people sometimes do when they have stumbled into an unexpected candor and don't want to examine it too closely. He asked about her day. She asked about his. She mentioned a book she was reading, a collection of essays on design and the psychology of comfort. He read it in 2 nights and told her what he thought about the 4th chapter, which was the one he disagreed with, and she sent back a long response explaining exactly why he was wrong. He found that he liked being wrong when she was the one explaining it. He had not told her who he was. Every time the conversation moved toward it, something in him recoiled. Not from shame, but from a fear he couldn't quite locate. She spoke to him with the same uncomplicated directness she'd used at the bar. He was just Fletcher. She didn't know what that meant in context, and he was not ready to find out what would change when she did. But it was coming. He knew it was coming. He planned it as a reveal, a resolution. He would walk into the hotel in his actual clothes. The suit, the shoes that cost more than a week of her salary. And he would face her, and he would tell her what he had seen, and he would tell her what he was changing, and she would understand why he had done it the way he had done it. That was the plan. The problem with the plan was that he had not asked her what she wanted from it. It was a Tuesday. The lobby was busy with a conference group checking out. Fletcher walked through the revolving door in a charcoal suit, his posture carrying 12 years of the particular authority that comes from owning rooms people are glad to be in. The noise of the lobby rearranged itself around him, the way noise does around power, whether or not power announces itself. Derek saw him first. Something moved behind Derek's eyes, the facial architecture of a man doing rapid and uncomfortable math. Camille was at her station, walking a guest through a problem with a billing charge, her back partially to the door. She didn't look up. Fletcher approached the desk. The guest Camille was helping glanced at him. She finished what she was saying to the guest, handed him a printed receipt, thanked him by name, and then turned. The expression that moved across her face lasted less than a second. Recognition, then something harder. "Fletcher," she said. Her voice was even. Camel, he paused. I owe you an explanation. She looked at him for a long moment. Around them, the lobby continued its business. Is there somewhere we can talk? He asked. I'm on shift, she said. I know. I'll wait. She looked at him once more, then turned back to her screen. She found him in the Meridian at noon. The bar emptied out in the lull between breakfast service and lunch. She sat down across from him, and she did not look like someone who had been blindsided. She looked like someone who had spent the morning deciding how to hold a difficult thing. I found out this morning, she said before he could speak. Alston Greer called a staff meeting to announce some personnel changes. He mentioned your name, the CEO. I did the math. Fletcher nodded. He had expected this. He had not expected the particular quiet of her voice. I want to explain. You came in disguised, she said. You ate in my bar and told me nothing, and then you texted me from a company directory like it was a coincidence. She paused, not for effect. She was simply choosing her words. I don't know what you were looking for from me, but I know that I told you things I don't usually tell guests in hotel bars. And I told them to a man I thought was just a man. That's not what you were. No, Fletcher said. It's not. He sat with that for a moment, not trying to rush past it. And I'm not going to tell you the disguise was noble. I came in because I was embarrassed not to, because I'd seen a video and read a letter, and didn't have the guts to just walk in at myself and ask hard questions. He looked at her across the table. Everything I told you that wasn't about what I do for a living was true. The conversation at the bar was real. What you said about belonging, about changing a moment, I've thought about nothing else since Tuesday night. She was quiet. I let Derek go this morning, he said, and I've restructured the performance review system to include guest experience flagged specifically for dignity-related incidents. Camille, I'm promoting you to Director of Guest Experience. A new position, this property first, with the intention to expand it. Because what you described in that bar is what every guest in every Ardent Grand is supposed to feel, and I need someone who actually understands it to help me build it into the bones of this company. The silence stretched out between them. That's a significant thing to offer someone you've known for 4 days, Camille said. It is, Fletcher agreed, but I've reviewed 11 years of your work here. This isn't charity. This is the most obvious professional decision I've made in years. She looked down at the table. He watched her process it, not with the eager relief of someone waiting to be rescued, but with the careful deliberation of someone who takes things seriously. I have one condition, she said finally. He waited. I accept or decline this on its merits, with a formal offer in writing, reviewed by an employment attorney. She met his eyes. Not because of what happened in a bar, not as a reward for a conversation. On its merits, agreed, Fletcher said immediately. She nodded once. Then I'll think about it. She stood. I need to get back. She walked toward the door, and then she stopped without turning around. She said, The 4th chapter. I've been thinking about your argument, and you might actually have a point, but you're still mostly wrong. She pushed through the door and was gone. Fletcher sat alone in the empty bar for a while, the midday light slanting through the windows. He was not waiting for anything. He was just sitting with the strange, clarifying sensation of a man who has walked into a room he owns and finally, for the first time, felt what it cost to build it. 4 months later, the city was in that particular state of early autumn when the air can't decide what it wants to be. Camille Osei, Director of Guest Experience at the Ardent Grand, a title that had since been formally extended to 3 additional properties, stood in the training room on the 2nd floor with 12 new front desk hires sitting in front of her. She had designed the training program herself. Fletcher had reviewed it. He had changed nothing. Before we talk about check-in protocols, she said to the room, I want to talk about a moment. She paused. Every shift, you are going to see someone walk through that door who looks like they are not sure they belong here. Maybe it's how they're dressed. Maybe it's how they're carrying themselves. Maybe they're just tired. She looked at the faces in front of her. Your job in that moment is not to assess them. It is not to price them. It is not to evaluate whether they are the kind of guest we want. Your job is to make them feel that they are already exactly the kind of person this place was built for. The room was quiet. Rooms get quiet when someone says something true. Across the building, in his office on the executive floor, Fletcher Dowd was on a call with a property developer in Boston. But he had Camille's training agenda open on the desk in front of him, and somewhere in the middle of a conversation about square footage and projected returns, he stopped paying attention to the call entirely. He was reading a sentence she had written in the margin of the document, in small, decisive handwriting. Dignity is not a premium amenity. It is the baseline. He picked up a pen. Underneath it, he wrote, "Agreed. For the record, you were right about the 4th chapter." He set the pen down. Outside his window, the city moved in its usual rush, indifferent and enormous. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Fletcher Dowd felt like he was running the company his father had actually built. Not the empire Fletcher had made of it, but the original thing, the 12-room inn, with the hand-painted sign and the philosophy of almost everything. He still had a long way to go, but for once he knew exactly which direction he was walking.